I'm in the studio here. Well, not really the studio. We're at New York at a conference, right, guys? I got David Wood and Vocab Malone with Acts 17 working together. And I've got a question for you guys. As it relates to apologetics, what about this idea of mockery or satire? Is there ever a place for it in apologetics?
Great question. So satire is only funny, and I would even say effective, if it's based upon some element of truth. So if it's not based upon something that's actually true, then it's just pure mockery or lampooning for real no reason. Okay. But if it's exposing something that's really true, then it can educate through humor or comedy. So I think we even see this really in the scripture. I'll give you a few examples. Elijah is with the prophets of Baal, and there's a contest really for the heart of Israel there. Will they be idolaters or will they serve Yahweh? And the contest is a very serious matter. It's not a joke. It's very, very serious. And it has to do with which God is going to send fire from heaven. But in the meantime, when the prophets of Baal are cutting themselves and calling upon Baal to answer their calls and their prayers, he does not answer because he's a false god. Yeah. Elijah mocks them and their God. Now he's really showing the insanity of their theology. That's what he's doing. It's not just to mock them, it's to point out how vacuous it is. Yeah. Isaiah does a similar thing in these passages that are sometimes called the Battle of the Gods, where he describes a man chopping down a tree, and part of it he warms himself with the fire, and the other part he carves into a god, then prays to it, even though it has no eyes and ears and can't respond to him with its mouth. And Isaiah points out the sheer ludicrous nature of the situation, but he clearly is using satire, you could even say mockery, to make a theological point. And he's doing so, I think, as a teaching method. Now, that's not all Elijah and Isaiah did. That's not all we do, but it is certainly one avenue, I think. And I would even say Jesus does it. For example, hey, Herod, you tell that sly fox, stuff like that. And so that is, I think, in the apologist toolkit, if they want to use it. It doesn't mean you can go wrong with it, right? But it doesn't mean it's never to be used. And I think there's biblical precedent to use satire and apologetics.
And I would agree with the claims about the Bible. For instance, when Jesus said to the religious leaders, you strain out a gnat but swallow a camel, right? He's mocking them. They would actually strain their water to make sure they didn't accidentally swallow the tiniest of unclean creatures. Jesus is pointing out, you are far more unclean than you are aware of. Yeah. And he's actually mocking them for being so meticulous in what they're doing while being so unclean in other ways. And so, but if we're talking about something like Islam, and this kind of comes from the biblical principle, because if you look at who the mockery would be directed towards, it's usually not a guy, on the street or something like that. It's usually people who had religious authority over other people and were leading them astray. Right. Those were the targets, right? Yeah. And when I think about that, I think, well, who is that? Well, Muhammad fits that category more than anyone else I can think of in all of history, as far as someone who's leading people down a wrong path. And so if I think if mockery and satire is allowed in the Bible under certain circumstances, then who can you use this with? Well, obviously Muhammad. So I take it as appropriate in certain contexts. If we're talking about Islam in general, I view Islam as not just a religion, but also as a political ideology, which does in fact call for the violent subjugation of the world. And so people think we're really mean when we're using satire or mockery or something like that, dealing with Muhammad. But I regard it as peaceful as we can be, in the sense that if this is not checked, then it leads to inevitable violent conflict down the road. And so I think we should try every peaceful means at our disposal of dealing with an ideology, so that future generations don't have to deal with it, to deal with, World War III or something like that. So if we can deal with it now, I think we need to throw every peaceful means that we have at our disposal at things like this. And hopefully we can deal with it at an ideological level, and we can avoid future violent conflict.